Who is the man of the Shroud of Turin? A new streaming series is asking just that question, and I have some great guests to break it open with you today. I'll be right back. Gracious Gang, it's Mike Creevy from thegraciousguest.org here with you today for another episode of the Gracious Guest Show. So thanks for stopping by. Make sure, if you have not done so already, to subscribe to this channel, give a thumbs up, like this content, share this content far and wide with someone you think will benefit from it today as we go deeper into a sense of wonder and awe and try to welcome a deeper kind of engagement with the world around us, the mysteries all around us, as Gerard Manley Hopkins, I believe it was, who said that the world is charged with the glory of God. And sometimes we lose sight of that. We get so fixated on the kind of humdrum, we get so attentive to these important but fleeting and kind of ephemeral details that we often lose sight of the deeper meaning in life. And so that's basically what I'm trying to do here on this show, is to go deeper into all kinds of mysteries and landmark aspects of the human experience that often get overlooked in our modern age, and we want to try to turn the tide a little bit on that. So the Shroud of Turin is back in focus here today on this episode, and I'm really excited for the first time ever to invite two guests on at the same time here today. With me are Angela Sealana and Nan Balfour. Angela and Nan are both very deeply involved in helping to produce, and then in Nan's case, she's the head writer. Angela is the director of this streaming series put out by the Pilgrim Center for Hope in San Antonio, Texas, and this streaming series is called "Who is the Man of the Shroud?" And it's a very very intriguing, interesting, and thought-provoking documentary series that they're producing, and there's a wonderful story behind it. The Pilgrim Center of Hope, as I mentioned, is in San Antonio, Texas. I've been to San Antonio, but not to the Pilgrim Center of Hope. That was many years ago. The reason that this all happened was because, by God's providence, I've gotten to know Angela really well over the last few years. We're both panelists and occasional hosts on SQPN's Secrets of Star Wars podcast. So we're huge Star Wars fans. We became fast friends over the years through just our involvement with that show that we really enjoy being part of. And then just through kind of conversation recently, I really was fascinated to discover a little bit more about this project that Angela's been working on. She's the media coordinator for Pilgrim Center of Hope, and then she put me in touch also with Nan. We were able to pull this together to have a chat about what some of the challenges have been in producing this, what the blessings have been as well. And what I think was most interesting about this interview perhaps was their really unique kind of approach to the project in general. They don't necessarily get focused on trying to prove, per se, the authenticity of the Shroud, but to ask this question, who is the man of the Shroud of Turin, and in a very personal, probing, kind of a relationship-building kind of approach to it that I find very interesting. And so, with delight, I now turn over here to the interview, and I think you're really going to love it, so let's check it out. Okay, well, Nan and Angela, thank you so much for coming on the Gracious Guest Show today.
Thank you, Mike. It's a pleasure.
Pleasure to be here.
Well, and this, I was just saying before we started, this is the first time I've had two guests on at the same time. So this is a fun step up maybe in the show. But just for those, probably a lot of folks potentially tuning into this, because we have a audience all over the place, it seems. Those who may not be familiar with Pilgrim Center of Hope, what would you want to share about the background or anything you'd want to tell us about the story?
Angela, I'll let you go ahead.
Okay. Well, Pilgrim Center of Hope is a 501c3 nonprofit Catholic apostolate, which maybe like the easier word to use would be ministry. And we're located in San Antonio, Texas. We are not formally like an office or department of the Archdiocese, but we do have a good, close working relationship with the Archdiocese on various projects, and we have their blessing, the bishop's blessings. But Pilgrim Center of Hope was started in 1993 by a married couple a permanent deacon, Deacon Tom Fox, and his wife, Mary Jane Fox. And they actually have their own very interesting story about how they were kind of your run of the mill average Catholic who didn't really know a whole lot about their faith and weren't really a whole lot interested in it initially. And they just had an experience. They ended up uh, leaving their full time careers and, first of all, working for their parish, going door to door and having a door to door visitation outreach for their parish, talking to anybody and everybody in the surrounding neighborhood of their church. And they did that for several years. And then after that, they felt a call to start a what's called a new evangelization apostolate, which is basically just sharing the faith, sharing the Catholic faith, the Christian faith, the message of the gospel in new and dynamic ways. And the really cool thing about Pilgrim Center of Hope, I think, is well, number one, we are very grassroots driven in terms of being very centered on relationships. Our mission, we say our mission is answering Christ's call. We guide people to encounter him so as to live in hope as pilgrims in daily life. So we're all about relationships,
Nice.
daily life. What does it have to do with me? And person to person. The other cool thing is that the history of Pilgrim Center of Hope and how the Foxes kind of gained the spark for their faith more so and felt the call to do what they're doing now is through the Holy Land. So going on pilgrimage to the Holy Land many times and encountering the real tangible stuff of the life, death, and resurrection of Jesus Christ and his followers up until this present day. And even some people who say, you know what, yeah, our ancestors, were babysat by the apostles or whatever, and so having those really, like I said, tangible and very real connections to the very beginning. So that is constantly at the top of our minds at Pilgrim Center of Hope.
Nice.
I am on the staff there.
And Mike,
I'm just laughing
I
when you
was,
said babysit. Oh, I just was going to say the babysitting thing.
yeah.
The first thing I thought of is like, can you imagine those stories? Like pitting them against each other, like, which one's a pushover? Like, Andrew let me have candy. Anyway.
Yeah.
So now I'm wondering. Go ahead, Nan. I'm sorry.
No, I was just going to add to that they went, Deacon Tom and Mary Jane went twice to the Holy Land. They've been several times, but on two specific occasions. The first one to leave their regular jobs and to go into ministry and then to start Pilgrim Center of Hope. Both happened in the Holy Land. They both received separately a message from God. And when one told the other one what God told them, they said, well, he told me that too. So they truly are linked, but a married couple. It's amazing.
Wow.
So yeah.
That is awesome. That's pretty good verification.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow. Well, that's awesome. And Angela, you said about, new evangelization. And of course, I think we have probably a lot of viewers and listeners who have heard that. And they're clearly here on YouTube or listening on the podcast. So they're at least somewhat aware of these newer means of communicating the gospel, new media, that kind of thing. So that might be a good segue here into maybe, and Angela, I could maybe start off with you on this just because of your specific role and how that might have tied in here to this specific Shroud series. Is this something that's kind of grown out of other initiatives, or was this something totally new? How did that kind of develop in terms of your own interests and expertise or background in your field, that kind of thing?
Sure. Well, I could probably talk an hour just on this one question, but to kind of put it in a nutshell, yes, very much so. This series that we're talking about, Who is the Man of the Shroud? It was very much an organic outgrowth and fruit of many of the things that we were already doing at Pilgrim Center of Hope. I'm the media coordinator there, and my experience is I've God has blessed me with an experience that is very multifaceted in terms of media, in terms of working in a corporate environment and a nonprofit environment, Catholic and secular, um, and being able to communicate and bridge between those. And so I'm very happy that we're able to have this series. One of the things that ended up happening because of what Pilgrim Center of Hope was already doing, the Foxes have a specific gift in that their careers before they started working for God was in the travel and hospitality industries.
Mm.
And so they have that background experience, and people started asking them to take them on pilgrimages to the Holy Land. Um, and they were okay, let's go. They went and they started going to pilgrimages. They expanded to Italy, Marian shrines, things like that.
Mm-hmm.
Well, your viewers may know that the Shroud of Turin is not on display all the time. So it's only on display at certain times, very rare occasions when the Vatican, the Pope, typically allows for public viewing and public displays. And so there were a couple of displays, three, I believe, in the last maybe 20 years or so. And so when I started at Pilgrim Center of Hope, I started in 2010. And very soon after, 2011, Nan, if I'm not
Yes.
mistaken, was the display of the
Yeah. I think it
shroud,
was
Oh, right.
2010.
and people wanted to go.
Yeah.
2010. Okay, so people wanted to go on pilgrimage. I'm not good with numbers, so I'm
Me
sorry. So we took two groups as Pilgrim Center of Hope. I didn't go, but we took two groups from San Antonio, Texas, and people saw it. They came back and they said, "Oh my gosh, we need something about the shroud and San Antonio." The other thing is that there is an exhibit in Jerusalem at the Pontifical Institute Notre Dame, which is just across the street from the old city of Jerusalem. And it's kind of what we shorthand call the Vatican owned hotel. So it's a
Okay.
pilgrim hotel where we always take our pilgrims whenever we go to the Holy Land. But there is an exhibit called Who is the Man of the Shroud?
Oh,
So
okay.
this exhibit was actually also seen by our pilgrims who would go to the Holy Land with the Foxes and say, "We need this in San Antonio. We need to tell people about this awesome information." And so the thing is that we had all these enthusiastic people. We formed a group. Long story short, we wanted to. We actually the exhibit was donated to us, so we did
Oh,
have the
wow.
resources to be able to obtain the physical exhibit. It's a multi many different pieces of the exhibit. I'm sure we'll touch on that throughout our conversation. But we wanted to share this with everyone. And Pilgrim Center of Hope, although we are located on 7 acres in San Antonio, we are in a former Teresian convent. So we don't have like a large facility to welcome a whole lot of groups and visitors and buses or anything like that. So we were like, let's build a building, and then the pandemic happened.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
Yeah. Um, and so we realized this is not going to happen on our timeline. So let's figure out a way to share Who is the Man of the Shroud with the audience, the people out there,
Wow.
in a way that they'll be able to really grasp and hold on to and be interested in. So we were already producing media presentations at Pilgrim Center of Hope on the saints and Mary and Jesus and all
Right.
those faith topics. And we were just doing little YouTube videos, and you can go look at them on our Pilgrim Center of Hope YouTube channel. But
I have those links below too for people to check out. So
great,
yeah.
thank you. But the thing is, we had an initial idea of what this would be, it just happened that we brought on some folks who were volunteers and dear friends at Pilgrim Center of Hope who are involved in the film industry in San Antonio. And it's not a big industry in San Antonio, Texas, more so in Austin. But we do have some folks here that work in the film and entertainment industries. And so we ended up creating something that's more like a streaming series than it is like a podcast, which is what we initially were planning to do. But it seems that kind of a more sort of, I guess, upscale, quote unquote, look and feel and depth, really, that we have been challenged to take on, and it's just been a fantastic adventure.
Well, then, man, how did you? Well, what exactly has been your role here in this process yourself too, and then sort of your entry into this particular
Yeah,
topic?
so I worked for Pilgrim Center of Hope for 10 years I started as the Catholic Women's Conference coordinator. So we have conferences as one of our nets that we call them. We have 3 nets. So
Hmm.
pilgrimage is one net, conferences is the other. We have the Catholic Men's Conference, Catholic Women's Conference, Catholic Seniors Conference, and then also our media outreach. So that's how I began, and then I started gaining on more events as the years went on and I got more experience. And during that time, it's funny because when I first heard about Pilgrim Center of Hope, I had just moved back to San Antonio. I grew up here, but I lived in New Orleans for about 20 years. And then Hurricane Katrina hit. And so my family and I
Hmm.
went to stay near my mom, which was here in San Antonio. And I saw one of the shows, it was called Living Catholicism Life, that Deacon Tom and Mary Jane are on. And I thought, I really want to write. That was my dream, was I want to write. And I want to do something for
Okay.
God. So I sent Mary Jane a letter saying, if you ever need help with a writer, well, she never contacted me. But when I went after a Catholic Women's Conference, there was a job opening for the position. So I applied and was hired. And through my job there, I was asked to write some blogs. We have a weekly blog, and we also have some through the Archdiocesan newspaper articles. So I was asked to start writing for them. And so I got my writing chops. And when the Shroud happened, and I want to interject here with what Angela was saying, because the reason that Shroud went from a permanent exhibition to video was, first of all, because of the pandemic. So a lot of our events pivoted to video. Um,
Hmm.
but the Shroud, we were noticing we have a weekly staff meeting, and we have a radio show called Journeys of Hope. And there was one episode that Mary Jane did on the Shroud of Turin. And it was done several years ago, but every week it came up as one of the most popular podcasts. So a radio show, because we turned the radio show into a podcast. So every week it was there.
Right.
Every week it's just like what you're experiencing with people so interested in the
Yeah.
Shroud. And we'd have all these new
Yeah.
programmings, but there was the Shroud episode. There was the Shroud. So we knew that we needed to do something, that people were interested in that. So I just felt called, like I'm already writing for them. So when it went through different permeations of what it was going to be. We were designing sets for it to be kind of like what we're doing here, where we were going to have an
Hmm.
expert on and just talk to them. But then when the Fields, it was a couple, Bill and Blanca Field, just walked into the Pilgrim Center of Hope one day, and Mary Jane mentioned to them about the Shroud episode, knew they were filmmakers, but they were like, oh, we want to help. So it just kind of turned into this streaming series, which is very similar to kind of how the Shroud of Turin research project happened, where we know somebody who knows somebody who knows somebody, and it just became
Right.
what it is. So we really feel like it's the Holy Spirit calling us. Um, and as the writer of it, I asked if I could write for it, and Mary Jane said yes. But when I started doing the research, I noticed a lot is already done. And you can go on the computer and the internet and wherever, and you can find anything you want to know about the Shroud of Turin. So I thought,
Mm.
why does the Lord want Pilgrim Center of Hope to do this? Like, what is he asking us for?
Mm.
And what I heard in my heart was, just tell the story of the man of the Shroud. Just tell his story.
Hmm.
And so that's, I'll
Yeah.
let Angela talk about how we're finding the experts, because she's the professional on this. She really has found some interesting people to be on the show. But it's really, he wants, it's not about proving that the shroud is the burial cloth of Jesus. That is not our goal. It
Sure.
is about telling the story of the man of the shroud. And what I heard the Lord tell me is, whether you call me Jesus or you call me the man of the shroud, I don't care. Just tell the story of the man of the shroud.
Hmm. Well, that, and Angela, let me ask you that. I'm going to look up a quote then too, but to maybe pivot on that point as far as like, and I have the website up here too. I'm looking at, um, for anyone who hasn't seen this yet, and I would encourage, of course, them to go and check out the website and check out. At the time we're recording this, you guys have, I think it's the first 2 episodes are
Correct.
up, correct?
Hmm.
That's what I'm looking at here. Yeah, and
Yes.
so, and I watched through those the other day, and yeah, I mean, you got Barry Schwartz, Dr. Kenneth Stevenson's on there. Um, I cannot remember. I don't remember her name. I didn't write it down, unfortunately. That I think there's an art historian that you interview on there.
Elizabeth Love.
Who,
She's,
Yes,
yeah.
Dr. Elizabeth
yes,
Love.
right.
Hmm.
So, but just a bunch of folks on there, and others, I'm sure. So, do you want to talk about that process a little bit, as far as um, if there were any challenges too, or the challenges and blessings along the way, in just getting this together, and actually getting it recorded, of course, I'm sure had its challenges too.
Yeah, well, I mean, as Nan was saying, we are telling someone's story. And to me, that is what really stands out, what makes this series stand out from all the other stuff out there about the Shroud, because of, as you recall, what I said about Pilgrim Center of Hope's approach is very personal and focused on the person. And really, that's, Pope Paul VI and the new evangelization and Evangelii Gaudium and all those good things that really we need to work on relationships and the person. So, what we're doing to find our experts is, first of all, we are very much trusting in the expertise of Barry Schwartz and Shroud.com, the Shroud of Turin Research and Education Association. There are a lot of people who claim to be experts on the shroud, right? And so there's definitely a lot of stuff to wade through, as Nan was saying. So we really use our own discernment, but we also, in that discernment, we have several sort of guidelines that we look at, and one of those things is, yes, you know, Stirp, obviously, and what they accomplished in, they're the only people who have directly studied the shroud, right,
Hmm.
in person. So that's one sort of pillar of our discernment in terms of who we bring onto the series. Um, the other thing is, we're not, so what we're doing, since we're not telling any particular story about the shroud itself, but about the man of the shroud, um, we're bringing on experts to explain their expertise. So, what do
Okay.
I mean by that? Well, if you watch the first episode, we're talking about art, as you were saying, Mike, because a lot of people, they see the shroud and they're like, "Oh, that looks like Jesus." Well, why is that? So we were like, we need an art historian to explain, why do people have that connection, right? Obviously, there's got to be an art connection to that, and so I have a mutual friend with Elizabeth Love. So does Mary Jane. So we were just like, let's bring on an art expert. We don't ask people what their opinion is about the Shroud of Turin before we bring them onto the show.
Okay.
And we have lots of folks on our crew that, you know, they they have any and all opinions about anything, and we don't have like a check box to say like, you must believe this and this in order to work
Sure.
on this series. um you know Even us on the producers level, like, we're not all in like total agreement on everything about the
Hmm.
shroud and who or what it might be. So
Well, it seems
that's
to
to me
encourage
another
a more inquiring spirit then too.
yeah,
Right.
exactly. Yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, if you want to be honest and sincere, in your presentation of something, by saying, we're not trying to convince you of anything. We're really not. We're really not. And I think that's one of the cool things. With looking at, you may have seen some other Shroud programs that kind of do an autopsy, right?
Mhm.
And look at, what does this image tell us from a medical standpoint. So we do bring on medical experts. We have all kinds of doctors at this point, all kinds of physicians and people with medical background. One of my friends is just happens to be a really respected scientific researcher. So we brought him on to kind of give maybe more of the laboratory perspective.
Like we have an expert. She is a professor from St. Mary's, and she is an expert on Greek. So we just that has not aired yet. I haven't even written the script yet, but she just takes us through the Passion of Jesus, but kind of like dissects the language of the Gospels. Not even sure how I'm going to work that in yet, but we're just finding these experts from
Right.
different places. You saw the man, Dr. Vester, who's an expert on the Savoy family. The Savoy family owned the Shroud for like 500 years. So we were just asking him about what he knew about that time period and what the Savoy family did. And then he, on his own, found out about Geoffrey de Charnay, who was a French knight. He owned the Shroud before the Savoy. So he was telling us his whole story, which we didn't know. So again, it's about the Shroud, but even if we talk about the stories of the man in the Shroud, but it's also stories of the people who have a connection to the Shroud. So the knight who had it for 500 years, the knight who, how did they get it? So it's their story. And I think we know that the Lord loves to tell stories. So that's basically what we're doing.
Right.
We're telling stories.
Well, and that's, I love, one of the things I love the most is that, you have these different, so many different ways into sort of considering this mystery, and sort of a to each his own kind of thing. I mean, like, that's been one of my great pleasures of stumbling completely into this, that I didn't seek, in terms of having a regular presence here on my channel of Shroud related guests, because, for instance, I interviewed an attorney a couple shows ago, and one of her big things is to approach it from sort of a legal argumentation kind of, what is evidence versus what is proof, and she made a really interesting point about the whole question of the chain of custody, so to speak, on it, and was comparing that to some very often kind of a double standard that comes up about the chain of custody that some folks sort of demand for the Shroud in terms of questioning its authenticity, that they don't subject many, if anything else, to that same level of I don't want to say scrutiny, but it was interesting. She was just going through from a legal standpoint, like, what do you need in a courtroom to convict? And then trying to compare that to, asking some of those same questions. So anyway, that's just an example of you have the history, the art history, you have the forensic medicine stuff. It's just very fascinating. And I think that's one of the great strengths, of course, of your guys' series too, especially being a little bit shorter. It's really neat to kind of see, there's like a real energy to it, I think, in these episodes, since they're a little bit shorter. How many, I forgot to ask, how many are there going to be total? I meant to do that earlier.
Well,
Nan,
or
we're not sure.
Our Lord will let us know. We were very ambitious.
Put you on the
No. We were very ambitious.
Okay.
We were ready to do. We started off one a month. We started off then no. It's going to be one a quarter. Now we're just saying as the Lord says it, because what we're discovering is that there's people who are on board. I don't know what his official position is, but he's our cameraman. He's the one doing the behind the
photography.
Yes. So he has a full-time job, and he's got a lot of work. And so he's doing this. He's giving us a great price because he wants to do it. So, but we're kind of dependent on him. So we just think that the Lord, he just keeps telling us, I got this. Just do what you do
Yeah.
and it will happen. So we have many times had to just step back and say, okay, well, we just do the next thing. We just do the next thing. And in between all
Yeah, I
this,
mean,
so
Sure.
starting on Sunday, we're taking a part of the museum exhibition to a parish. So there was a group of parishioners from this
Okay.
parish in Burney who went to the Holy Land, saw the museum exhibition, found out that we have some of it. So it's at some of it, we have the sculpture, 3D sculpture of the Man of the Shroud that's at our
Oh, wow.
at the ministry at Pilgrim Center of Hope. Other things are kind of like stowed away somewhere until we get the building, but they were on fire for it. And they're like, well, bring it here, or
But they're
bring it
there. Yeah.
here, bring it here. So we are having
Wow.
a 4-day mission. We're calling it a journey with the Shroud. So pieces of the exhibition are going to this parish. We're presenting on it. And this just came up. So if we do this, we can't be working
Wow.
on the episodes, but we just think it's all part of what the Lord's asking us to do. So
Sure.
yeah.
Oh, and just to clarify, just for the sake of anyone when they might be tuning into this, if it's later, so that would be February 5th. Is
5th.
that right?
Yeah. So yes.
2023. Okay.
Yes.
So so this is something obviously that we, again, to encourage guests, here, or viewers and listeners to, I guess everybody's a guest. No, but viewers and listeners to as they check out the websites and everything, to maybe see some more updates about potential opportunities like that, especially if they're in your area there. I would hope they'd be able to learn more probably from the website. Is that somewhere they can check for that information?
yes. So on
Okay.
discoverwho.org, you can find all the information about the series, as well as sign up for our regular updates for those who want to stay updated by email. But we do also have a page now dedicated to events and presentations. So if folks are interested in a presentation, a screening, or even bringing a small group to Pilgrim Center of Hope, we are dedicating a couple of rooms that used to be Nan's office when she worked at Pilgrim Center of Hope, which we've now sort of remodeled into this Shroud exhibit. So we are going to have some of the pieces of the exhibit available for small groups as well. And that
Hmm.
includes the sculpture, that includes a full-size replica of the Shroud, the full-size negatives, which we also have illuminated in the back, so you can see them a whole lot clearer.
Neat.
Replicas of the cap of thorns, the nails of crucifixion, the Roman flagrum. So there's quite a bit to see, and for folks that are looking for an opportunity to share that, we will have that available at Pilgrim Center of Hope, and then if you would like a presentation, in your area, we're open to that as well.
I just love, there's I think it was in 2007 or 2008. So there's been a lot of development in certain studies and stuff like that, and findings, since then. But I first saw on Formed, Augustine Institute's streaming platform a couple of years ago. Like, I had known about the Shroud sort of in the background. I knew some general theories about it, but not a lot of detail. I just thought, well, that's kind of neat. Wouldn't that be neat if, that's Jesus's burial cloth? But I didn't know a lot of the details. And I just remember watching that documentary. I think it was a BBC documentary that was really well made, and I think it's still on Formed. And it was so funny because I vividly remember the part where they go to Dr. John Jackson's house, to his basement or wherever it was, that has that whole array of very, very meticulously sort of constructed and arranged replicas, and the backlighting and everything. And I just remember thinking that is the coolest. I want that room, or some version of it, because it's just so much work has gone into that. But thinking about these different portrayals that, you said, Angela, there's so many different folks who and I'm not saying this in a critical way or anything like that, but so many people, like you said, who are to some level experts or claim to be experts, or and that might be debated a little bit. It's hard to wade through all of that. That being said, there's of course a lot of claims about the shroud, and sometimes you hear some that turn out to be possible, but maybe not as a sure thing as maybe they conveyed. And that's been a big thing I've learned as I continue to go through this is, to try to be careful about not immediately jumping on, you know, the next cool thing you hear about.
Yeah.
But that being said, I'm just curious with all of the work you've been doing here with this documentary and also with the exhibit. I'm just curious if either of you would want to, or both of you would want to share maybe what has been some of the more interesting or compelling pieces of information, put forth about the shroud for you personally. What really kind of strikes you?
Well, I just learned learning something every day. I mean, you can, if you go to shroud.com, which has the bulk of all the examinations from the Shroud of Turin Research Project, but everything that everyone has done since then. And Barry Schwartz was the professional photographer for STURP, and he's the editor. So he kind of, he makes sure that it's all legit and everything. Well, I learned today because I have this problem with the whole positive negative thing. So they say that the shroud is a photo negative. And so when they took the photo of it, the photo was the positive. Well, my mind just could not, because you're looking at a black and white picture and it looks like that's the negative,
Right.
but it's the positive. So anyway, so what I learned today was the image is the negative, and that's it. Not the picture of the shroud, the cloth. When he took that picture, that's a negative. The blood that's on it. When he took a picture of that, when you're looking at that picture, that's the negative. The only thing that's the positive is the image itself. So only the image is the negative on the shroud. And I was like, wow. So, I mean, that's just one today.
Yeah.
So,
Wow.
and also I learned photograph. So photograph is a Greek word meaning to write in light. So a photograph is a writing in light.
Oh, yeah.
And then now when I read the
before.
scriptures, you see so much about Jesus, the light, and the unapproachable light, and the transfiguration, the light. So it's just like all these things are now popping out at me that I never even paid attention to before. And that's all because of the shroud.
Yeah. Wow. How about you, Angela?
I think for me, I mean, we're learning so many amazing things that are either tangential to the shroud or directly related to the shroud. Again, because we're just interviewing people about their expertise, right? So,
Right.
we're not going to ask a doctor what their opinion is about the Shroud of Turin, but we're going to ask them about the medicine, that's related to it and so forth. So I think, in learning so many amazing things about so many different topics and subjects that there are out there, I have to say that to really honestly answer your question, it has to be how the shroud impacts people is so completely varied and different. Um, we have most of our crew is young, like in their 20s and 30s, because who else can work those hours in the film industry, right? Very few of us, when we get that, that much older, can really have that grueling schedule. But I mean, they are all fascinated by this. And some of them didn't even find out what they were working on until they got on location and we briefed them on what this project was. But they were just like, I love that they're eating it up. They're asking questions. Yeah, they're asking us questions off camera, and there's that. We've got our composer for this series is a former death metal musician, Juno award-winning death metal musician. But when you hear the music, that might surprise you. But he's fascinated by the shroud, and he lives a very simple life now, and wants to do good in the world, and he believes that, like we do, that the shroud can really bring people together who have such varying views about so many different things that are, and the fact that we can all sort of wonder and ponder and reflect and discover our humanity and beyond, and wonder about the mystery of it all. to me, that is what I continue to learn and to treasure the most, is every person that works on this series, what how they are impacted by everything that we're doing.
Well, listeners of this show have heard on a few occasions, some friends of the show who we've had on before, in the UK, who I'm sure are watching this. Hey Brenda, hey Pam, are regularly able to, in their circles. It's very interesting. They've had a couple occasions to sort of do a Shroud presentation. Sounds like it's not unlike the one that you guys have there, but one that they've put together over the years for various Muslim communities and gatherings in the UK, and leads to some very interesting discussions. And then I had a chance to talk to Charbel Raish from Perusia Media in Australia, which was one of the most interesting timing conversations ever, because like we're talking, I'm like, I just ate dinner, and he's like, I just ate breakfast.
Yeah.
And we're completely like in different. He was in a different day. I thought that was
Yeah.
interesting. But he was, he shares his story, which I found so captivating, about, again, it's not his personal experience, isn't, like scientific proof of the authenticity of the Shroud, obviously, but it's something that you can't just ignore as if it doesn't, as if it isn't something worth pondering a little bit. And his story of, being right on the threshold of becoming Muslim himself, because a lot of the influence of his friends at the time, I think he was like 18 or 19, and he, his Lebanese Catholic mother smacks him and says, like, go down to the tabernacle, or go pray for an hour, at the parish down the street. If Jesus says that, he wants you to do that, fine, So he's there praying, and right at the end, or near the end of that prayer time, he sees this visible face appear on the tabernacle, and hears the voice of Christ speaking to him, and has this powerful conversion experience. And he tells it that, he had never seen the Shroud before. He had no experience with it. It was not part of his world until like years later. He's like walking out of a church or something and sees that face on the booklet or something, and just freezes. Like, that's the specific face that he saw,
Wow.
like down to every detail. So I've heard, just in this ministry and then other places too. I'm with you, Angela. Just the stories people tell are just phenomenal. Or some kid who's like completely, has just had it with everything, and is very rebellious and just antisocial, even, or whatever the case is, and they just freeze, and they're just standing there and staring at that face, and don't even know what to do with it.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's there's so much to be potentially said about it. But let me just ask you both. We're down to just a couple more minutes here, if I can keep you for a little bit longer. Just, if there's, I'd really like to just get at kind of big picture here, with just, and you've already hinted at this a little bit, but any goals, like big picture goals, key takeaways, like for your specific exhibit, and for the man, or who's the man of the Shroud streaming series, what would you really hope that people take away from it, or that they're able to sort of come away from it, having experienced, or being aware of?
For me, it's just that they wonder. So they wonder. I was listening to the podcast you did with the filmmaker, David Rolfe. Was that his name? Something.
Rolfe, yeah. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And he said something I thought, well, that is very interesting, because he said that the reason that his documentary was not a hit in the United States was because he said he was told Americans don't like questions. They just want to be told what the answer is. And I mean, in my opinion, that's what the education system has done for the last 100 years. You're just tell me what I'm supposed to do. Just give me the answer. There's that
Sure.
commercial with, I think it's Gary Oldman. It's like, I have a phone. Why do I need to ask, why do I need to want everything? I just look it up on the phone. It's like, so it's actually causing people to wonder. And you talked about the lawyer, what they'll accept evidence on all this other stuff, but not on this. It's because if you accept the evidence on this, something's going to be asked of you. Like, you're going to have to say, I believe or I don't believe. So we may not even get people to that, because even our Lord didn't do that. I mean, there's many people he did not convince, even though he was face to face with them. So just my goal is just to present it, and it's up to the person what they're doing. When the museum exhibition first came to San Antonio, the founder of it, Father Hector Guerra, he was a Legionnaire priest. He's now gone on to the Lord. He said something that, and this is what got me, that I really wanted to be part of the Shroud with Pilgrim Center of Hope. He said it's not the job. We were being trained as docents for the exhibition. And he said, you just take them around, you show them the evidence. And at the end, you ask, who is the man of the shroud? And he goes, then your job is to step away. And it's between that person and the Holy Spirit. Your job is over. And so I see that as still as the goal of this. We just present it and we walk away. And it's up between that person and God.
Wow. That's great.
For me,
How about you, Angela?
yeah, I really, really appreciate that reflection, Nan. Thank you. For me personally, and I have to say, I'm thinking that maybe the reason I got the position of director, that I ended up this way, is because I have sort of a different mindset with all this, which is I don't personally feel like I need to decide who the man of the shroud is. I know who Jesus is for me. And whether the man of the shroud is Jesus or not, okay, that's cool. I don't see the Shroud of Turin as important to my salvation. But it is an amazing devotional tool for me, to appreciate what Jesus went through. And ultimately, that's what I'm hoping to share in terms of a faith aspect, is whenever I share my faith with someone, it usually involves part of my story. And part of my story is inevitably going to involve part of my suffering. And so, I believe
Sure.
that that's one of the reasons that people can relate to this and be so interested in it. True crime is like the top genre watched, and has been for a number of years now. And I think part of that is because, well, number one, we want to kind of escape from our own suffering and our own day to day. But also that we have suffered and we sort of can grasp how that works. And so in terms of takeaways, I just hope that, yes, definitely people will wonder, but that their wondering and that their questions will ultimately help them to heal, will help them to find the answers and the peace that that I believe God wants for them. And so, yeah, whether they say the shroud is Jesus or not is for me a different sort of separate topic than just simply sharing the story and seeing what people can heal from and take from and impact in their own life.
I think that's a great point, because it's not enough to, like someone is convinced, you're like, hey, Shroud, that's Jesus. All right. Back to my gambling addiction, or back to my, like, well, no, like there's like your life, your struggles, your sins, your salvation, redemption. It's not just a matter of trivia, and I think that's really powerful. And quite frankly, the how many people in the Gospels, I mean, that are like you said, Nan, too. Like, there's people who don't just see a potential incredible duplication or representation of our Lord's face, if that's indeed what it is, but they're looking at him directly, like he's speaking to them. And like the rich young man,
Right.
just says, well, nah, I love money. I mean, so I think we have to, maybe there's a call to humility in this too, where, we might be very tempted, those of us who might be more convinced it's authentic, or that case, there can be a temptation there to sort of get on a high horse without even meaning to, or just be maybe overconfident in your sort of salvation, when you might have some stuff, as we all do, that you need to take to him now, rather than just see the image and go, yay,
Right.
so. Well, I appreciate so much both of you coming on here, being able to share some not just some great background information, and we have these resources for people to check out, but just some wonderful insights and things for people to ponder and really take to prayer, hopefully, as they do their own research and continue to dig into this mystery and others as well. So thank you both so much for coming on today.
Well, thank you for the
Thank
invite.
you,
It's been
Mike.
wonderful.
That certainly gave me a lot of food for thought, and I'm sure it did for you as well. And like I said at the outset, a lot of very, I think, important insights that came through that conversation. A lot of thought-provoking, truly thought-provoking things to kind of carry away from this, hopefully, as I was asking them at the end there, but kind of key takeaways. And so I, for one, continue to enter into this mystery about this shroud, and we have so many great interviews on this channel. I invite you to go and check some of those out. We have a lot more to come, and for that and everything else that we have coming up on the Gracious Guest Show, definitely stay tuned, subscribe, share, like this content, and until next time, folks, don't forget to wonder. God bless you.